So for that business owner, they want to transition the business to family. What are some of the practical things they need to be thinking about doing, maybe even when it comes to, the finances, the legal side, not the relational?
Well, if you do what we said earlier and you make your succession plan gradual, it helps a bunch with the financial side because it isn't a sudden moment in time where someone has to come up with bazillions of dollars to buy dad out or mom out or whatever, or your uncle out, whatever the scenario is. And so if it's been planned over a long period of time, then it helps position the next generation to make that financial plunge if there's one involved. Certainly there's a lot of companies a lot of families do things differently. In our case, Sharon and I have worked very hard to be independent, and we've been really blessed. So we're more than independent. We're in really good shape. We don't need income, or we don't need the asset of Ramsey to exist. So when the day comes, if I'm alive and handed off, they will not be buying me out. They'll just be taking it. I'm managing it for God. They'll begin to manage it for God, and they'll become the owners, the formal owners at that point. We've already transferred the majority because of estate planning, but it's not going to do with the power flow or the governance. I have control today. But when I relinquish that control, then if you're a business owner and you're listening, get your act together on your own. Have $1 million in your 401k. Have some rental properties that are paid for. Have some stuff, and then the business doesn't have to be put in a huge financial strain for the next generation in order to support you. And so that's a big deal, and that might take you 10 years. That might be part of your 10-year transition plan, your succession plan. So get your act together, independent of the business. Now then, if they're going to buy you out, it can be stuff where you give them almost all the cash flow for 3 years, and the next generation just takes a salary, a minimal salary, but all the profits go to mom or to dad or whatever to buy out. 3 years of profits buys them out, or 4 years of profits buys them out, and that would give them a huge nest egg if that's your only thing. But a lot of small business owners that are family do not do a good job of having investments other than the small business.
Yeah.
And you need to have your own 401ks. You need to have your own real estate investments. You need to have your own stuff other than that.
So how important is having an outside party like an attorney get involved, and at what stage would you begin to do that when it comes to transferring a business?
You need to consult one early on about how you're going to do it. I mean, we decided 12 years ago, how we were going to do it mechanically with an attorney. And then really we put a few things in place. We've done a few adjustments as we've gone along here or there, little things. But some of that was from a tax planning standpoint, from estate tax planning, and some of that was structural. But then, and we've got it set up to where, there's only one last step, and that's the last little bit of percentage, which is all the voting stock that I'll hand over. And that'll either happen at death or at quote when I step aside. And my intention in this case is I intend to still work here and be a Ramsey personality.
Who'll report to me?
Yes.
I don't know if I'll be able to behave or not. Yeah.
So how do you know? Is it based on a timeline? Because you're talking about 10 to 12 years. Is this a hard and fast thing? And hey, we set this goal and say at the end of 10 years we want to be in a place where this can happen?
Well, what happens is it makes you answer the question like it does with a lot of strategic things of what must be true. What must be true is the finances need to be in order. What must be true is the next generation needs to be ready. What must be true is the brand transfer, if there is one, that's associated with the founder needs to be able to have been handed off. In our case, it's been a big deal. What must be true is the next generation, I think I already said this, needs to have the money. The money needs to be figured out. And so then you start working towards that. If you don't set a date certain, it's like these guys that call me on the radio and they go, well, my fiance and I'm like, well, when are you getting married? Oh, someday. Well, that's not your fiance. Not until you set a date. Painter, get off the ladder. And if the founder will never quit, unless they force themselves to by putting a date down. And you'll be 87 years old with your 67-year-old child running the business with no power and no backbone. And that's not healthy for the business. It creates a horrible thing for the next generation, and it really reflects poorly on you.
So how do you know when it's time to say, all right, I'm out, I'm letting go? Obviously, death is one way to do that, right? That's an easy way to let go. You don't have control of that, but is there a point where you go, all right, I don't want to do this anymore, or I'm not in a place to be able to do this anymore?
I think it's an individual decision that you make with your family and with your leadership team. But do make a decision and put a date down, because otherwise you'll kick the can on down the road. Now, you can kick the can down the road if the things that must be true aren't true. If you say, all right, the next generation has to be ready to lead, and they're not ready to lead by the date you thought, and everybody around you is going, they're not ready. If you hand it to them right now, you're going to break their back. They don't have muscle structure to carry this thing. Then you've got to stay a little bit longer and finish the mentoring process out or whatever. And or you got to decide if you're going to go another direction because they're not able to lead it, not able to carry it. So, if you've answered all the questions of what must be true, then you stick with your date. And some people go, I want to retire at 63. Some people want to quit sooner. In my case, I enjoy coming down here. I'm going to force myself to step out for the good of Daniel, Rachel, Denise, and for the good of Ramsey. I'm going to force myself to do it, but because I could work until I can't make sense, and it wouldn't bother me a bit. I could drive it all the way into the ground. It wouldn't bother me a bit. But it's not good for the things that I love. It would be completely selfish.
So as we wrap, Daniel, I want to hear from your perspective as the next generation. What advice would you give to those that might be in your spot where you're going, all right, I got to carry this thing. I've got to make sure this transfer is smooth. What advice would you give to those people?
Yeah, so for me, when I first joined the business, I raised my hand and kind of waved my hands and said, hey, when it comes to talking about the future, when it comes to talking about what my potential role could be years down the road, I don't think I am at a place where I can emotionally carry the weight of what the future could hold. Like, I want to focus on being the best salesperson I can be. That was the role I joined the company with full-time after college. And so for me, I said, hey, guys, can we just not have that conversation because I'm not ready for it. I just really need to win in my sales role. And over time, as I grow, I think I will have the capacity from a confidence, from an emotional, from a spiritual perspective that I can carry the burden of this path. And so over the years, as I grew in my role, we had more and more open conversations about what the future could hold. Now it doesn't intimidate me at all. Now well, that's not completely true. Now it intimidates me significantly less than it used to. Now I'm excited about what the future has in store, and I know that God, of course, as I mentioned earlier, is always going to throw us curveballs, and He's going to do that on purpose so that we are forced to rely on Him, or we're forced to stretch in new ways that we wouldn't stretch ourselves. And I love how God does that for us. I don't always love it at the time, but and so that transition should be gradual. It shouldn't be this, if both parties are intentional, if both generations are intentional, like we've been talking about, it won't be this overnight transition. It'll be over time. It'll be talked about. It'll be processed. It'll be earned more than anything.
I think what's important is, again, I'll go back to the gradual part. If you haven't started your succession plan and your transition plan, you're late. Mm-hmm. Well, my child's 3. You're late. You should have started when they were born. You need to start it because you've got to start processing it in your head. They've got to start processing it at the different levels. Like Daniel said, he didn't want to talk about it early. Now he's more open to talk about what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and those kinds of things. So you begin to talk about it, and then that allows that person that's coming up to be mentored by your leadership team, to build relationships with the leadership team that they're going to be leading, the organization they're going to be leading. It allows them a personal growth curve, because they got to put some tools in their belt they don't have in order to be ready. And so you got to identify and go, like when I was 32, I had, I had 10 people and I was a boss. I wasn't a leader. And so I get John Maxwell tapes, right? And I start reading leadership, everything I could get my hands on. I didn't know what a leader was. I was a boss. I told people what to do. That's all I did. And most of the time they didn't even do it. So, it was awful. It was horrible. And I'm a world-class leader today. But that didn't happen for me, and it's not going to happen for my successor, and it doesn't happen for you out there listening. And it's not going to happen for your successor. It's not a natural state of affairs to grow. It's an intentional act. And so reading, growing, attending conferences, sticking with EntreLeadership, all the different things you can do to become better. And the successor, needs to be continually sharpening their saw.
Mm.